computer. Okay, welcome to the discussion. This is what episode is this, JeRod? Episode 17.
17. Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
17.
Wow,
17.
episode 17. You know, first I want to acknowledge JeRod Lindsay, my co-host there. What's up to you, brother?
Nothing much, man. It's good to see you out. Good to be here with you all.
Yes, yes. And then we have some very distinguished and special guests. Number one, to my bottom of my screen, I would like to introduce Eddie Koen. Please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so Eddie Koen, President and CEO of Urban League of Greater Southwestern Ohio. I've been in Cincinnati actually a year to this day. So that's been dope and challenging and full of promise and pain and opportunities, all of the above with everything that's going on. So started off career, in the legal field. So I started off my career at Equal Justice Initiative down in Montgomery, Alabama, working with Brian Stevenson, representing poor folk on death row, and everything in between, and sort of went back and forth from governments to nonprofit. Came here from Denver, Colorado, and the last stop was at the United Way out there as their chief impact officer. But always been a part of the league, was involved in Birmingham Urban League, was on the board of the Denver Urban League. And so it's just, I always said if there was an Urban League job that would open up in the community that the wife agreed on, because, that's really the real boss. So when Cincinnati opened up, jumped at the opportunity.
Thank you. And then also, Rickell Smith, if you can please introduce yourself. We would love to learn about you.
Sure. Rickell Howard Smith. I am the Executive Director of the Center for Social Justice at Urban League. I am born and raised from Cincinnati, left for about 7 years to get educated, and came right back. I started my career at Legal Aid of Greater Cincinnati, representing people living in poverty. And I went from there to become a civil rights attorney. So I have been practicing civil rights law, started out representing prisoners at the Ohio Justice and Policy Center, working with David Singleton there. And then I hopped over the other side of the river and was director of litigation at the Children's Law Center, which is based in Covington, Kentucky, but most of my work was in Ohio. In the course of being a civil rights attorney, I've seen it and probably done it all because every case is different. So I did a lot around, Fourth Amendment cases, filed some cases against police officers, represented kids in education cases in schools. And after litigating for about 12 years, I needed to take a break. I took about 1.5 year break from litigating, and then I ended up here at Urban League. So that's sort of a snapshot of my background. Is there an echo? I hear an echo when I talk.
Maybe JeRod, it's coming from JeRod, so I'll be sure when he's done speaking, we'll go ahead and. So, okay. But I'm gonna unmute you, JeRod, right now. So.
All right, thank you. And if my career if that was a snapshot of my career, I think I'd be done by now, Rickell. So thank you for that, Eddie. Thank you as well. I really want to get right into the meat and potatoes of things, especially, Rickell, with you speaking to your past as a civil rights attorney. Obviously, we're all aware of the Breonna Taylor non-decision, right, to prosecute. What are you all's thoughts on that? I know Eddie, I've read some articles that Eddie has written in just how social justice, how it impacts economy and things of that nature. So I would really like to get you all's thoughts on the impact of the lack of decision for the Breonna Taylor case and just how the Urban League, just what you all think about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, a few things. First, just from a personal standpoint, as a Black woman, as a mother, because I could, I'm the age where I could be Breonna Taylor's mother. I'm frustrated, angry at times, exhausted. It is continuous trauma. Every single time we see this happen across the country, and then a police officer is not held accountable, that's additional trauma. So, you know, that's how I feel from a personal standpoint. As an attorney, I am still frustrated, especially, you know, as a civil rights attorney. But, you know, as I watched the Kentucky Attorney General's press conference, what I was able to do is really pick apart how curated his response was, how curated this whole process was. I don't think that they had really intended on you know, pressing charges for Breonna Taylor's death in the first place. And there's a couple of things as we get into it that I'm happy to like go into, but overall there was just a lack of transparency from the very beginning. You know, first, no one was talking about it until, you know, there was a civil rights lawsuit filed, and it got a little bit of media attention. But after, you know, folks in Louisville started protesting, that's when we started getting some of the facts. Police department was not transparent at all as to what happened. And that's typically my first clue as a lawyer, that something ain't right about it. And then the fact that the Attorney General assembled a grand jury for me, and knowing that that's a secret proceeding, it means that, you know, it was very intentional as to not let the public know the real facts of the case. And there's just too much on the line here. You know, the whole country is watching, and it almost feels like a slap in the face to Black communities all across the country who have taken to social media, taken to the streets to demand that they arrest the cops that murdered Breonna Taylor. It's like, you know, you give us this curated response as to why you didn't, or why the grand jury didn't, but we really don't know what happened in those grand jury proceedings. We don't know what type of case he presented. So again, I feel like it's a slap in the face.
I appreciate that. I do have a follow-up. So from my understanding of the case, and obviously, as you said, it seems like a lot of facts have been misconstrued or haven't been available to the public. Police come in with a no-knock warrant. The boyfriend shoots first, right, is what I'm hearing or have heard, and then they return fire, right? So do you feel like you still feel like they weren't justified and they should have still been charged, even though it was a return fire?
Well, I think that this is where the warrant issue comes in, because the question is whether they legally had the right to bust open the door and be in the house in the first place, in my eyes. You know, I think that when the Kentucky Attorney General sort of laid out the facts as he wanted to, you know, he talked about the fact that there was witness testimony as to, you know, what happened. But he also said that in his opinion, the warrant, whether it was a no-knock warrant or not, that was a civil rights issue. I don't know if you caught that during his press conference, and he said that he wasn't going to address it. And I actually, as a civil rights attorney, I think that it is very much a critical fact here, because it will let us know whether they had a right to be in that home in the first place.
Right.
We know that Kenneth Walker has a right to defend himself in their home at the time, but I haven't seen anything that makes me feel conclusively that they had a right to be in there in the first place, given the fact that the warrant that they were executing was for a suspect, as I understand, that had already been arrested.
When they say that, when he tells us the warrant was a civil rights issue, or how is that so? Can you how is that a civil rights issue?
Because typically, so trying to think of the best way to explain it. So the reason why a cop has to get a warrant in the first place is because we all have Fourth Amendment rights, the right against unreasonable searches or seizures. So the cop has to go to a judge and essentially prove with the evidence that they have reason to believe that you have something that is either illegal or you've done something illegal if the warrant is for the person. So typically, if a warrant, if it's a bad warrant and somebody gets, hurt after it's served, that is something that I would take up as an issue in a civil rights case. But I don't agree with the Attorney General when he says that it's only a civil rights issue. The reason why they are intertwined no matter how you dice it, right? Because when you come in with a warrant, you're seeking something for a criminal prosecution, right? So they have to be related. And also you can, I'm sure you guys have heard of this, if a warrant was bad, then the case gets thrown out, right? Because because it's not legal. So I don't agree with what the Attorney General said, but that is what he said.
So.
Right, and essentially, JeRod, I think what he was trying to avoid was like some form of criminal negligence, right? And to keep this as a solely civil issue, which we see in these cases all the time of, yeah, there are civil damages, but it didn't rise to the level of criminal liability or criminally negligent. You know, there's different penal codes across different states, but that's what they are trying to avoid. And, you know, even just on a moral basis, it's just if someone comes in my home and I'm thinking I'm protecting, that doesn't give you the impunity to shoot everyone in my home, right? And the thing about the grand jury wasn't a determination of guilt or innocence. It's just saying we have enough evidence to actually litigate those facts. You know, it's just, this is like the bare test of like, hey, I think you got enough to bring charges. And it's like, and you insult the public to say, not even that. We don't know anything. We don't know about the shot. We don't know if the boyfriend put Breonna for all this stuff is unknown. And to really just say, no, we're not going to bring charges. It's just, you know, again, it's such a slap in the face. It really, I mean, you talk about what I wrote about. It's just, we're so tired of these concessions that are meaningless, right? We talk about body cams. We talk about agreements. We talk about all of this stuff, but we can't really get accountability to the one thing that we need, which is officer criminal liability. It is obvious that these massive civil suits are doing nothing to disincent police behavior, like at this juncture. And so it's like, what is it going to take? You know, and really, we're careful when we do interviews because there's always a red herring about how you're protesting or who was doing the protesting, right? They never want to address the substance of why it has actually happened. And I would even contend that violence and disruption has a very significant place to drive social change. You know, we know MLK, he protested peacefully, he still was assassinated, right? Colin Kaepernick, he kneeled, right? And you're gonna have an issue with this. So there is no perfect way to protest. And if there was no camera during George Floyd, we wouldn't be here. If he tried to litigate that through the proper channels, that police officer would still be on the force, and it would happen again. So it's just like, I think there needs to be an appreciation of how essential the legal system and the civil disruption system is to really drive social change. So we tell folks we are supportive to folks that are taking the street. We tell our staff, you know, if they want to participate in demonstration, it is an essential part of the progress. You have to demonstrate and socially disrupt, then make your demands, and concede your power to make demands after that.
I'm excited that you brought in protest and social disruption, because there are some in my peer group who say protesting is old. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't change anything. There's no point in taking to the streets. We've been doing it for years. What would be your response to that, Eddie?
Yeah, that's absolutely false. I think it's essential. It's a three-leg stool. One, even if you're just protesting to be out there to express your outrage and arm, because if we don't have an outlet to express that, we end up taking it out on our own communities, inside our own families. One. Two, it's to let folks know that there's an open resistance to something that is unjust, right? You know, sometimes we don't get the second and third leg, which is organizing around a plan and making a list of demands and then holding people accountable to that but protests are essential to you name one movement where there was not, I would say in some cases, violence and protests. We can't, you literally cannot name one moment in history that had any significant social change where there was not civil disobedience and protests. Even MLK, when he marched peacefully, the disobedience and the violence was against him, which really outraged the public. So this notion that burning and that civil disobedience is not the way to go I think it's fanciful. And there's no evidence that working within a system that works. We have to have a multi-pronged strategy with allies that are inside of the system, people who are hell raisers who will raise hell outside, the folks who are the honest brokers and the convenient in between. And I think when we think about how anti-Blackness works, they usually pit those folks in the system together. We saw evidence of that with a Black attorney general, who could, I'm like, you're not crying over yourself. You're crying because you're having a moral dilemma, and you're essentially doing the work of white supremacy. The facts of the case and what you're having to do right now. And so you have to have like protests, you have to have an internal strategy, and you have to have those brokers that are unseen, that are behind power, that can feed you information to really drive social change. And that shows up in Cincinnati too, and anything that we do to drive social change. It's like we have to have internal allies on city council that'll say, hey, we're gonna bring this issue. These people over here are gonna disrupt. How do we really drive change for our community? Absolutely critical. I know it is frustrating because we see it over and over and over again. So it seems like it's not doing work. The entire reason that 70% of Americans are saying that Black Lives Matter is a legitimate movement is because of those people in 2016 who went to Ferguson, right? And those Black, queer, and trans activists that said we've had enough. We're not gonna wait around for these sort of folks who are waiting on a system that is designed not by us, but we're gonna take it to the streets. Like that is essential. That is a part of it. The people who marched and got beat up, the continuum from 1920s, to the 60s to now, it is all critical to drive. You have to have the right timing and the right momentum. So absolutely, not saying that they have to do it. We all have our space in the movement. You don't have to go out and protest, but at the same time, I don't knock anybody who does it. Your role in the movement could be, I'm just going to donate my money, or I'm going to donate.
Uh-oh.
I'm so good. Eddie had me ready to go.
I know,
Eddie
me
had me
too.
ready to go protest.
So yeah, hopefully he'll come on back. Rickell, can you add your thoughts about it?
Well, he kind of covered it, but
I know, right?
But the thing that I will say, just to add on, is I think that especially in the Black community, we have to be careful about criticizing people who choose to express their anger or protest in one way or another. Yes. It may not be your cup of tea, it may not be my cup of tea in any given situation, but I think that criticism of how other people sort of express or what they feel like action is ends up being another one of those wedges that, Eddie has sort of talked about, like that white supremacy trying to creep in and create some type of dissension within us. Sometimes we talk about that in the context of age. Older folks like, why y'all out there tearing up stuff? And it's like, okay, in the 60s and 70s, y'all was out there tearing stuff up. Everything is a cycle. In the 90s, some people were out there tearing stuff up. And it's like, it's very cyclical. And I think that we all have to realize, no matter what age demographic you come from, socioeconomic status, like we really have the same goal. And it is not productive to criticize the way that one person moves or not. I think that the most productive way to move forward is to see how you can collaborate or either, help to further what this person is doing, maybe, sort of coordinate what your demands are going to be, et cetera. so that's the only thing that I wanted to really add on there. When the protests, you know, first started this summer back in May, that is, at least on social media, what I saw a lot of, like, y'all out here tearing stuff up, you're burning stuff up, etc. Well, the same thing happened in the 90s, same thing happened in the 60s, same thing happened, you know, so that you can't be surprised that we're going through that cycle again when the circumstances are still present. Almost identical circumstances are still present. So that's the only thing I wanted to add.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Rickell. I appreciate that. Eddie, I was just telling Rickell and Mo that you had me ready to go protest right now, right? I was all the way there, so I appreciate that. I like how you brought back Ferguson, because it's eerily similar how the Mike Brown situation, the Mike Brown case, was never brought to trial either, right? So those two things do align. With social justice, what is the Urban League doing, or how does the Urban League impact social justice? How is that a part of you all's strategy to move the community forward?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because people come to us and say, oh, it's great. We like to see the Urban League involved in civil rights issue and social justice issue. It's like, historically, that's where we've been. We may get off track every now and then, but we've always been around equal rights. So our whole symbol is around equal rights and has a social justice context before it was even called that, you know. So we essentially have two areas that we work on. It's financial empowerment and community leadership. And the community leadership context is around social justice. We know that you can have a great program, you can have strong outcomes, evidence-based work, but if you don't really tackle policy, if you don't really get to the heart of the historicity of racism in the community, it's all for naught. So, you know, and community leadership is important too. And I always talk about resident-led community leadership, you know, like even something as small as iconography, like the Black Lives Matter mural, you know, that was about economics, paying Black artists. So funny story about that is when we first came to ArtsWave about it, there were 11 white artists that wanted to paint the mural. Alandis actually said we need Black artists. So that employs 60 Black artists that was able to be a part of a commission work with the city that put money in their pocket and that they're still getting money off of. So I think why economics is so critical to social justice is because it's the real accelerant to social change. Mississippi didn't have an epiphany and said that all of a sudden we love Black people, let's take down our Confederate flag. No, Mississippi had the SEC. They had several conventions that said we're no longer going to come there because you're racist, right? So we know that economics is a powerful accelerant to social change. So even when we have things like the Urban Leadership Institute, which is essentially our program to cultivate our leaders, which is being redesigned, it's not enough to just put Black people in the middle class, because we've seen plenty of that. It's to build a socially conscious middle class that knows the importance of buying Black, that knows the importance of advocating for communities that may not be able or have the social capital to speak for themselves. So we lend our voice. You know, we know that we have a big voice as the largest Black nonprofit in the community, sometimes quietly, sometimes publicly. You know, people didn't know we were we were advocating with the legal team for the governor's office around the mask mandate before they decided to make everyone wear a mask, you know, because their writings essentially articulated a store owner can tell you whether or not to wear a mask. We're like, that's going to be a problem for Black folks. So we got to get on the phone with your legal team. We're not going to raise a big hoopla. And then as the weeks progressed, it was like, okay, now we're just encouraging everyone to wear a mask. So we do a lot of stuff behind the scenes, advocate for businesses. We're not a chamber, but we do service 1,600 businesses across the region. So if we were a chamber, we'd be the third largest chamber right under Northern Kentucky. And we host the Small Business Development Center and the African American Business Development Program. So it's really what is pertinent in the time and what are we called to do. So thankful to Phil and Gallup Holloman, who gave us $1 million to start the Center for Social Justice. They are Black donors. A lot of people are surprised when we say that and understand the importance of supporting Black leadership, Black organizations, No other demographic really finds it a mystery. You know, we wouldn't think of saying we want to support women's rights and we would give to someone else. Think of going to your church and saying, I want to support you, pastor, but I'm going to give money to these people up the street to support you. That doesn't really make sense, right? So we're really, really thankful to empower us to do that work, really wanting to tackle policy, but that social justice sometimes isn't, it isn't as flashy as some people think it is. Obviously, we care about policing issues, police brutality, specifically outside of Cincinnati, where people don't pay attention, but it's things like Lincoln Heights, right, which is a 70-year-old issue. We deeply support those brothers and sisters from the Lincoln Heights movement of like, we need to make this happen. It is making the grocery store in Avondale become a reality because there have been people who have been working on this issue for 10 years. Shout out to Councilman Wendell, Renee closing the health gap, Monica Mitchell of like trying to get a grocery store there. It's like, hey, we could use our resource to make this happen. It's actually training folks to use their voice in ways that are efficacious, right? Of saying, here's some things that we've learned. We'll have a strategy session with you secretly that's not public and on Zoom, but here's some things that we've learned and some resources that we can shoot your way, whether that's Avondale Community Council or any other group. So we really look at ourselves in any way like Switzerland with the civil rights cause. You know what I mean? We have the institutional privilege to be in a lot of rooms, you know, where we're talking to the highest people in government, the highest CEOs of multinational corporations. And at the same time, we're talking to folks who are organizing to defund the police movement of saying like, how do we help you? Because we know we are all aligned in a lot of ways. And then unfortunately, even when we don't want to, we have to speak for folks, even if we haven't even been in contact with them, because we only know the Urban League. So how's the Black community feel about that? Even if we say we can't speak for the whole Black community, it's the same burden that the NAACP wears, and they're all volunteers. You know, as soon as there's something, it's like, where's the NAACP? And then I tell them, do you know the NAACP doesn't have paid employees? Those are all dedicated volunteers that do this day in and day out. They're like, oh, I didn't know that. It's like, yeah. So it's an honor, man, to be able to serve and to say we got a bad team, bro. Like we got dope people on our team that are intelligent, wicked smart, that can advocate, that are from the community. Any issue that you think about in our community, it lives within the Urban League. We got folks who've got parents who are locked up, brothers who are locked up, folks who have been killed by violence, killed by police officers. So it's like we live and breathe, and it is inculcated in the culture of Urban League that we have right now, which is why we move fast. You know, it's what are they doing over there? It's like we don't have time to waste because we are proximate and we are near people who are suffering so much, and we don't have time for this piecemeal stuff about change. And we really need people who are dedicated to our communities and wellness.
Certainly. And JeRod, I got a question there. So, Rickell, which I want to come back to, you know, you have an awesome team. And I know Rickell just joined you all not too long ago. And previously, she was at the Greater Cincinnati Foundation. Could you talk a little bit about your work at the Greater Cincinnati Foundation and what led you to Urban League? Because, you know, I've read that and, you know, was very, you know, very happy to have you join the Urban League. So you can talk a little bit about that.
Can I tell the truth, Eddie? No. So you heard me mention as I was talking about my background that I needed a break. Civil rights is extremely challenging, especially in the space I was representing children. Most of my kids were, you know, in the juvenile justice system and everything that comes along with that. So from a family standpoint, you know, I was getting calls at 2 o'clock in the morning from kids that needed me. And that secondary trauma took a toll on me, just being frank about it. So when I thought about, you know, what my next step would be, I knew I needed a break from practicing law. And the thing that I had always was a barrier for me in the work that I did was raising enough money to really fund the work. Legal services, especially when you are representing people that are incarcerated, that society sees as the, you know, less than, it was always difficult to raise money. And I was determined after being a part of a national leadership program that I was going to learn how to raise money. I was going to learn how to raise money for the work that I wanted to do. And this, you know, the position that was open, just, it was happenstance because the position that I took at Greater Cincinnati Foundation was to oversee all of the grant making. So I sort of got right in a position where I can see full vantage point, not just the dollars that went out, but had an opportunity to see what made donors tick and how you cultivate donors, and also be in a position to educate them as to why, you know, putting dollars into legal services, or really policy work, putting money into policy work, how that's the real systems change that you want to see. Like I think was stated earlier, you know, these donors have been donating to the same organizations for the last 50 years, the organizations that are implementing programs. Basically, the ones that are sort of feeding the fish and not really looking at the lake or the groundwater that is really creating the situation in the first place. And I'm not surprised that donors didn't understand, because all of this stuff, especially a criminal justice system, it is so complicated. It is built for people not to understand. Like, even people who have gone through the criminal justice system don't understand. You have to be specially trained, i.e. a lawyer, in order to really understand. And that's not the way it should be. But so in that position, I got a chance to do all of those things. In addition to, you know, I spent my whole career working in really small nonprofits. I got a chance to have this experience working in an organization that was well-resourced, is sort of pseudo, is a nonprofit, but pseudo corporate.
Yeah.
And aside from just the whole like culture shock, like, hey, like, I don't have to sign out my pens, you know, I can take as many pens as I want. Outside of stuff like that, I got a chance to see how well-run organizations work,
Yeah.
right? It was.
And shout out to Ellen Katz as well. I seen her on the think tank yesterday with Eddie here. So we're honored to have you there. But yes, go ahead. I'm sorry. Okay. Just wanted to shout out Ellen Katz.
It was, and I feel like that is significant, because I think that just my view from where I was at GCF and my experience working at small nonprofits have to, or maybe not have to, they just do operate from a deficit standpoint, like never asking for as much money as you need to actually do the work. You know, you ask for enough, like, okay, I could use one more staff person. So let me ask this, you know, donor for enough to add one more staff person. But what do you really need to make the change that we want to see? Do you need a whole crew? Do you really need 10 people? Mm-hmm. And I think that working at GCF really changed my framework around philanthropy, around even now working at Urban League and being back in a nonprofit, the real nonprofit space. It's like, I don't have nothing to lose but to ask people for what it takes to actually do the work. Either they're going to say yes or no, but me taking, you know, going in asking for 10% is not doing anything for the community. And if you come in, you know, kind of with that mind frame, then I feel like that probably 70% of the time you're going to walk out of that room with exactly what you need in order to do what you need to do in the community. Now, the question around how did I end up at Urban League? So,
this
Eddie,
is breaking news to folks.
Okay. Wow. So, well, I thank you all for allowing us to be on the discussion. That's pretty right. Pretty amazing, actually. Oh boy.
So, I met Eddie, I guess, shortly after you came, and Eddie, I mean, Urban League was blowing up. I mean, just to be frank about it. And then, you know, around COVID time, we talked a little more, and I talked to other members of the senior leadership team and sort of saw what was happening on the outside looking in. Had some conversation about some grant making that we were going to do to the Urban League, because it really was, at that point in time, the organization that had the capacity to do and the flexibility to do what was needed for the Black community, i.e. passing out masks through, you know, the community outreach workers, collaborating with other organizations to have COVID pop-up sites, like all of these things that we saw sort of unravel in real time. So fast forward, we were on a call with some GCF staff and some Urban League staff, and Eddie had said, yeah, and oh, by the way, about to make this big announcement about a social justice center that we're launching. So after, or maybe during that meeting, I said, social justice center?
This is breaking news for folks right now.
Right. I feel like I could talk about it now.
Okay.
But it you know, it was something that I was like, if this is not something for me, then I definitely want to fund it. That's where my mind was going. And then when I saw the job description when it came out, I actually showed it to my husband first, and he was like, babe, that's you. Like it was that. There was no question about it. It was like, that's you. They wrote that for you. So, you know, we had a couple of conversations, and I just kind of knew it was time. And I really do feel like it was difficult to leave GCF for all of the reasons that I had named before. And I made a lot of connections, particularly with Black-led organizations. And I knew that there could possibly be a consequence to me moving on. Hopefully it wouldn't have been, because those relationships would continue with other folks at GCF. But I also knew that the things that I learned at GCF, I was going to be bringing to the Urban League. And that's exactly what philanthropy should want, right? Is to have high capacity folks with the skills that's needed to really build up these anchor, or to continue to grow the anchor institutions in our community. So, yeah.
No, and that's a great point. And your chief impact officer, Ashley Young, you know, I worked with her at Interact for Health. So, you know, she was a evaluation officer at Interact for Health. So I'm sure, you know, she's able to have that lens as well. So great job.
Dope.
Great. Yeah,
Ashley's dope.
Yeah, I love. Shout out Ashley Young. Shout out to Ashley.
That's another catch.
Yeah, definitely.
And, 2 weeks before me, Cinnamon Pelly started.
Cinnamon Pelly, exactly. Yes, exactly.
So that was definitely Eddie, I think, threw that in there during one of our discussions. Like, you know, Cinnamon is coming. You know Cinnamon, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I know Cinnamon. Like dope. So,
and then
Eddie has definitely put in the work to build a team.
Certainly.
I was about to say the exact same thing. Eddie is out here stealing people. Good work. Hey, you know,
he just said it, didn't he? He didn't supposed to say it like this, right?
No, I'm joking. I don't want to give Eddie a bad rep, man. I'm just saying Eddie obviously is a great recruiter. You mentioned that when you showed your husband the job description, that he said, babe, that's you. What's the job description? Let us know.
So, of course, I negotiated a couple of changes, but for the most
which she's
part,
very talented at doing, right?
That's right.
Like, he probably like, damn,
a little.
Right. Actually, you know what? You tell us what you want. You know, this is, you know, you tell us.
Yeah, I'm sure the hubby's laughing at the little.
Right. Because I looked at the job. He was like, "Yes, that's you," and I was like, "No, what they really need." I'm like,
right away.
Saying, what they really need is this, and that. So, so coming into it, especially, you know, I not only talked to Eddie, but Philip Holloman, because this is really rooted in his vision.
Yes.
Prior to, you know, being offered or taking an offer, I had a conversation with him, and the thought was really to build this initiative from the ground up. You know, here in Cincinnati, we have the collaborative agreement.
Yep.
There's a foundation for, you know, a collaborative process where communities can work with police departments on reform efforts. But outside of the city of Cincinnati, there is nothing like that. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of communities that are not having conversations, not active conversations about whether racial profiling is prevalent in these municipalities, about whether there's things that happen under the cover of dark that don't make, you know, it on social media or in the news, whether there are things happening, you know, incidents around excessive use of force that we just don't hear about. And we know that Black folks live in these communities as much as they live in the city center. So, you know, really coming in with that vision, my role is to, again, build it from the ground up. And that goes from operations to fundraising, but most importantly, for setting the stage for the work that is going to be done, like policy advocacy. How are we going to get connected with communities? How are we going to get connected with police departments? And really what we will do. So that was coming in probably the first 2 weeks is, you know, I took some time to reacclimate myself to the national landscape. And of course, there's tons of stuff out there, but I had to reconnect with folks that I worked with 10 years ago to say, hey, I know you're still working in this space. Let's talk. I think that the cool thing about it though is like locally and nationally, so many folks were excited about this center here in the greater Cincinnati region. I was able to reach out to people that I had never met before, and everybody was happy to talk to me. Because I think that folks recognize that this police reform work and this systemic change that we want to see is really going to happen on the local level, yes. Right? So when you hear about an organization that's saying, I want to work with these local police departments and local municipalities, because I think that's where the real problem lies. And it's not going to change from some statewide legislation, right? I think people got really excited and wanted to provide resources, wanted to collaborate. So things have been very, very busy in the last month. I've only been here a month, right? Yeah. And especially because of the climate. Since I started, we had the Kenosha incident happened following the Breonna Taylor case, and obviously the news that came out this week. So in addition to doing this local work, we are working, I mean, Urban League would be doing this even before I came. Right. But now that I'm sort of wrapped in the fold, you know, we have to respond. We not only have to respond to these national incidents, but we need to understand what the implications are going to be for our own community. We have to anticipate that our folks are going to want to protest too. We know it happened in Louisville. We know our folks are going to protest too. We know our folks are going to want to hear from us. We know people are going to want to organize around things. And guess what? We have some ideas. We have some draft demands, you know, things like that. So I think that if anything, and this has never been the case in any other job, I hit the ground running. Like my feet were barely on the floor, and I was just like, right. And I don't think that Eddie would have it any other way, right, Eddie?
So, and JeRod, I got another question there. So, you know, we're talking a lot about Cincinnati, but, you know, you also cover the Miami Valley area, you know, the Montgomery County, those kind of areas. If you could talk about how your work also connects with that region as well.
Yeah, sure. So a lot of folks who are, if they're listening to this, don't know. So the Urban League of Greater Southwestern Ohio, we are in the greater Cincinnati area and Miami Valley area. So actually the Miami Valley Urban League is older than the Cincinnati Urban League. It actually started in 47. And so they went through some challenges years ago, shut down the Dayton Urban League, and we reconstituted as Miami Valley Urban League. We're this close. We're actually about to hire another executive director, very different and distinct place than Cincinnati. You know, the poverty on the west side of Dayton is more pronounced. So a lot of our work is basic needs focus in Dayton. But similar to what we've done there, there's a lot of interest, not as many Black organizations as there are in Cincinnati,
Right.
that have capacity. So rebuilding that, we're really solely focused on jobs and careers in Dayton, but really over the next 2 to 3 years, hiring some local talent and really saying, what does it mean to really take this same social justice land and apply this to Dayton? They're more progressive, because they have that awesome university there, and they got some incredible activists. So we've been really plugged into the leadership there. It's just a matter of taking the blueprint of what does work in Cincinnati and letting them customize it to Dayton specific issues and problems. But our main focus there has been getting folks to jobs, radically reemploying folks. I mean, now that the unemployment is sort of drying up for people through Corona, we're seeing just the economic devastation is just more pronounced in Dayton. There are folks,
Yeah, they've had a
Avondale
couple
has-
big hospital networks
Exactly.
closed down up there.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah.
So we're saying, Care Source in Dayton, which huge, laid off a massive amount of people. And that's interesting because we have typically serviced those folks who are kind of, if you had to classify them, they're kind of, sort of struggling to sort of upper, lower class. We have an entirely new demographic of people who have never engaged in nonprofit help. They've never had to tap social services, very prideful. So we had to really focus on anonymity over this past 6 months of like, hey, my wife and I both work for Hospital X. We got kids in school, tuition. We don't even know what to do. Where do we even start? Help us navigate. What do social services look like? So it's caused us too to change internally around just like how we do service delivery. When everybody shut down in March and April, we stayed open. We had to. Even we had some essential services that were still at the office and still go to our office, but we had to. Our volume picked up by 5, like times 5, both in Cincinnati and in Dayton for things like food. We do have a mass distribution center out there, but the churches are dope too, and they work collaboratively in Dayton. So a lot of the stuff we do piggyback with them of saying, hey, if we're doing employment work, if we're doing mass distribution, this dope church on the west side, they do something every Tuesday and Thursday, then let's just plug in with you all. So it's a small but mighty staff up in Dayton of 6 right now, but we'll be 7 soon. Really over this next month, we're wrapping up the hiring process for the executive director up there. So excited for sure.
I like, Eddie, how you mentioned that, when COVID hit, it hit Dayton extremely hard, right? Which it did, obviously, all of the world, right?
Yeah.
One thing I'm interested in is how did the Urban League pivot? That's one thing. But also, with so many people losing their jobs, I know the Urban League has this program. I'm not sure if it's SOARS or what
SOAR.
the program.
Yeah, SOAR. Yep.
Yeah, so
That's
what you all do, and just to give people, right, a background of how awesome this program is, because I've had people work with Rocky, I've had people work with Terry. You bring people in, you train them for job-specific things such as call center work, contact center work, things of that, construction work.
Yep.
How are you with Dayton needing basic needs? How has COVID impacted you all, and how are you all pivoting to just help such a large amount of people?
Yeah, and we talk to other Black-led nonprofits of like, this is our Blockbuster moment right now, right? It's when Blockbuster saw all this digital stuff happening, and they decided, no, we're gonna keep doing our tapes, 3 to 5 days a week. By the time they pivoted, it was too late and they're out of business. And so that's really been, it's been a transformational moment for us. It's like the digital landscape is not going anywhere. Even down to, because AI is happening at a rate that is so rapid, where it's not a question of, am I going to check my socials? It's, do I check it while I'm in bed or while I'm peeing? You know what I mean? Of like, and just the data analytics from people scrolling and how long you scroll. So one, we have just radically invested in our staff, like upskilling. So we've had more training over the past 7 months than we've had over the past 10 years of just literally around the clock training of like, because we got a community that needs to catch up to speed. So we have to know the ins and out of where to hold your camera, put the light behind you, you know what I mean? If you need a laptop. So our traditional programs that most people know us for are SOAR, you know, and ACE, which is the call center program, you know, that are typically these 3 weeks program that are intensive, that does radical soft skill training, your pitch and everything. So we've added to that in this social environment now. So now we have like rapid reemployment programs. We partner with a technology company called True Blue that's based out of Tacoma, Washington, and an app that they have called JobStack. So think about the gig economy for a second, that almost 44% of jobs are now paid through technology. So SOAR, when it was conceptualized, didn't have the same jobs that exist today. You know, any talk that I do, I always say 44% of jobs in the African community were going to be eliminated by 2030. That was before COVID.
Yeah, you mentioned that at the think tank. Yeah.
Yeah, and 40% of white jobs, 46% of Latino jobs, right? Before COVID. And now that we've had this radical infusion of technology that people see, folks can work from home. It has changed the game. So we're trying to make sure that we stay agile enough to say, what is a whole new suite of industries? If someone comes in and say, I don't have time to train for 4 weeks, my lights just got cut off, right? Okay, we have a technological solution to say you can get to work immediately by going here, but we're gonna keep you in a cohort to sort of interview you. We're doing a lot of opt-out programming versus opt-in, right? So instead of saying, here's 50 different options of like, you're part of our program, now you're part of our financial empowerment center where we're gonna talk about credit, managing during COVID, budget, things like that, and just keep you in this cohort of learning and see you on the continuum of what else you want to do. Secondly, I think, JeRod, the people we serve are different now. People aren't staying in companies for 10 to 15 years anymore. They're wanting to go somewhere for a year, 8 months, try somewhere else. So even just the nature of jobs are training. So we never thought that we could tell someone that they could walk dogs through an app and they would make more than they would do as a shift manager at Kroger. But that is a true statement, right? So we had to really redesign our whole team to say, we just got Jessica from Cincinnati Works, who's dope, who was crazy inventive of saying, what is the suite of options, for opportunities for our folks. So we've got SOAR, we got those programs, but we really have a number of new programs, including our Financial Empowerment Center, where we incent people to save, to learn about investing. People don't know about unaccredited investors, that you don't have to make $200,000 to invest anymore. What's the safe amount of doing that? How do you actually start to build wealth in a very small and we call it everyday wealth, you know? So just a lot of cool things. And of course, we partner with this company that's Black owned, called Powered by Action. It's based out of Chicago. So what they do is take every program that you have, and they really target high performing, really Black nonprofits, and they digitize your content. So if we don't have a cooking class for vegans, we know that there's a Black nonprofit in San Diego that has it, that we can digitally enroll our clients in. So they're getting a higher dosage from folks who care about them that will yield higher outcomes. So it's just been a radical redesign of like how we do programs, of how we think about. So far, for so long, Black nonprofits have just managed to the grant, you know, of bureaucrats who are well-meaning, but they've never lived, they've never breathed our community, and they're saying, here are the outcomes and the metrics that you have, right? And they're just not close to the people we have. So really thrilled about like integrating technology in the work that we do, based on real-time demands of what we're seeing. So it's been dope, and just to have the talent that can execute on that stuff. We have served 29,000 people to date. Before that, the highest we had served was 18,000. It's just been crazy demand right now, and we've served a lot more businesses. You know, we administered PPP loans for Black and brown businesses in partnership with Goldman Sachs, you know, because we couldn't get banks to take us serious locally. So we ended up working with Goldman Sachs, right? So I'm just saying, look, it's possible, just keep grinding and doing it. Now that gave us even more credibility to work with some local banks because we work with Goldman Sachs now. It's crazy how that works, right? But that's how anti-blackness works. So we just keep pushing at it, man. Again, like the key to it is a dope team. We got a board that's awesome. Philip Holloman is our chair.
Yes.
Who is also pro-black and understands like the struggle.
Yep.
And
he's on the board of directors for the University of Cincinnati as well, correct?
Yeah,
Right,
as well as a number of for-profit boards.
Yeah.
Of just understanding like here's how I can. It's like I have a guy who's a well sought after, national, international executive coach as my board chair, right? So it's like when we're thinking about complexities and how to simplify stuff, it's like, hey, Philip, look at this for me. You're retired. How can we make this work? And that's the thing about our problems, like our social issue. There is not a lack of talent in our community. It's not. It's just not. It's not a lack of talent. It's not a lack of passion or a lack of will. It's just really fighting through the own anti-blackness that we possess in ourselves. Yeah. The resources isn't even a thing, right? It's fighting that deep anti-blackness that we possess, that we can't work together, or that we seek the approval. We have people who will give $10,000 to non-black organizations, but they won't give $1,000 to the Urban League because that white acceptance is conditioned, even in our giving, as black philanthropists. So it's really building a coalition of the willing to say, if you trust in us, if you give us $100, we're going to make it more efficacious, and we're going to make sure that what you're investing in is impactful and powerful for our community.
Certainly. Thank you. And we're almost at the end here. In fact, we got one more minute. And Eddie, I think I appreciate you, summing that up for us. Because you have anything else you wanted to add?
True. Eddie took all the good lines.
I know, right? Well, so let me ask you this: how can, and we'll take as brief as you can. How can persons like myself and JeRod support Urban League?
I feel like Eddie would answer this better, but I'll talk about the Center for Social Justice. I mean, we are really just gearing up. Community engagement and community-led efforts are going to be the center of all of this work. Community-based solutions to the issues that we see with policing. So I think that if you are a community member that is interested in seeing a change, then absolutely reach out to me, because we will need volunteers. We will need folks in the community to stand behind some of these demands and be willing to take them, for the long haul. Because especially if you reside in one of these municipalities outside of the city of Cincinnati, because the role that the center may play could be a convening role, bringing people together. However, in order for reforms to really take place and to be there for the long haul, you're going to need the community there to push that through and to take it where it needs to go. Exactly. So if you are interested in volunteering, you can absolutely reach out. We've already had quite a few people reach out, but we'll need more for this work. Definitely.
Certainly. Any last remarks, Eddie?
Yeah, I always say invest in the Urban League. We don't care if it's $5 a month. That is so much more meaningful to us, because when we have unrestricted dollars, it allows us to be creative and invent, and tap into the Black genius. When you have a staff that's 85% Black, we know that we are awesome and we can do it. We just need the resources to do it. So it's like invest. 1. 2 is just to help folks along this path of educating. We talk about anti-Blackness because we all know about white anti-Blackness, but just within our community, we talk about everything that white people need to learn and not enough about what we need to unlearn, right? And that's sort of the jealousy, the envy of the backstab and the cap. Like we're not going to get through that perfectly, but we need to get through it enough to really impact our community, and educate. So I try to do it. I try to advocate for organizations who are not a part of the Urban League, other Black organizations that are in this work, Black Chamber, Mortar, GCMI, folks who have been beating a gun, Iris Rowley, who I love and admire, Al, who have done this police brutality work, because there is such a great sacrifice when you work for Black people, because you have to be strong, because they're going to attack you. They're going to malign you, because we have anti-Blackness in us, and what we do. So you really have to have a thick skin to know that, one, I'm going to have to face white supremacy. And I know that if I'm late on something, it's going to impute every other Black nonprofit, right? Or if somebody's mad at what Donna Jones Baker did to them 10 years ago, they're still going to judge me about it. You know, they're not going to judge Moira from the United Way about something that happened with her 3 predecessors ago. That's just how it works, right? So we already have to navigate that, and we're used to that, right? Because we have competent and capable, accomplished people, you know, but then we have to deal with our own community, right? Of just, what are they doing? I don't trust them, to the extent that we have to even sometimes hold out on announcements, because we know if we put it out too early, it'll be attacked.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? And so that's painful sometimes, you know, so it's just educating people around like anti-Blackness. We got to work together. We ain't got to be perfect, but nobody's going to save us, man. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's why I left the United Way. I was a private equity guy for a profit, you know. I worked at a district, and it's just, if we don't really build up our own institutions and use our expertise, nobody's going to save us. We've seen other groups that have done a great job at this. You know what I'm saying? And they know how to support their businesses, their institutions, to build them up. So that, and then third, you all have a voice. You know, everybody knows both of y'all, man. so you have the influence. You
That's
know,
JeRod. That's JeRod.
You know, it's like, it's JeRod. You talking to JeRod and Maurice? I'd heard that about 20 times.
Oh, really? Oh man, no, man, you made my day now.
This week, man. So it's just, you know, using your own individual influence, man. We're really trying to Rickell's point. 2021, we want to mobilize Black volunteerism. You know, we have all these folks who sort of who are well-meaning, and we need allyship. You know, but we really gotta help our own community in ways that are thoughtful. And there are a lot of people who are working at it, but to really be effective and to really have the conversation of who is best positioned to do what, who has the capacity to do what. So just using your influence to spread the word about what you do. You're gonna hear stuff. Who is this new guy from Denver? Is he even Black? You know what I'm saying? From the South Side of Chicago? Like, nah, he's legit about our people. Like that endorsement means something because we spend too much time on foolishness instead of helping our community. And fighting white supremacy, we have to be focused on that. You know, and sometimes we don't have time to engage, you know, to go on other shows to defend, you know, this false jurisdiction over Black people. You know what I'm saying? Like, what is that about? So that's been, you know, a little annoying, but we stay forward, we stay optimistic, building a good team and keeping it moving. But thanks, man, so much for just having us here. For sure. It's been dope.
Yes, and
one last thing.
Yes, ma'am.
Like the Urban League of Greater Southwestern Ohio Facebook page, and share our content, because that is the way that the content is gonna reach as many community members as we can.
Okay, perfect.
You all have an Instagram page as well, Twitter as well.
Oh yeah, they get the whole enchilada. So yeah, and I'll be sure to get this video to you all so that you can share it as well.
Will do.
Yeah, and you know, we'll definitely do the same thing.
You did the breaking news about how Rickell got here. You know how many times I've got that question?
Yeah, I know, right? Right. So you giving us
I've
some
avoided
exclusive
that
content.
question pretty effectively.
Exclusive content. So thank you, Rickell, for sharing that. And you know, and we had Shar Fisher Jackson on last week, and she's definitely a champion for Urban League. And
Shar's dope.
Yes, and you know, you all are a pillar for our community, and you know, definitely want to highlight you all and share this information to those who may not be aware of the Social Justice Center and you know, the great work that Urban League's doing. So, JeRod, you got anything else you want to add?
Man, I just want to say thank you, both of you. I feel like this was very informative. Rickell, thank you for giving the tidbit in regards to civil rights. Eddie, you touched on AI and its importance, and I really want to emphasize that within our community, because I just feel like so many of our people, especially with going virtual school learning, right? So many of our people it's possible that they'll be getting left behind, our children and things of that nature. So we'll definitely do what we can to sing you all's praises, to uplift the Urban League. I love the work that you all mentioned that you are doing. So just keep up the great work, and thank you so much for joining us on the discussion.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you all. So we had a little glitch with the Facebook Live, but I'll make sure we get something up so we can get people.
It's all good.
So,
it happens.
Yes. So
have a great evening.
Thank you all. Have a great evening. JeRod, get ready to get rested, man. All right. Enjoy. All right. Bye-bye.